God of War is one of the most beloved game franchises in modern gaming history, with 9 releases already out and probably more in the future. It has stunning visuals and giant boss fights that really distinguish itself from other action games. So in 2010, when Santa Monica Studios was coming out with God of War 3, there was another company that wanted to give this type of game a go, creating the video game known as Dante's Inferno. Electronic Arts, aka EA Redwood Shores, aka Visceral Games, were the maker of Dante's Inferno, based off the very long poem by Dante Alighieri, I can't say his last name, where the protagonist journeys circles of hell, encountering many historic figures and the hellish punishments of its sinners. The game has a lot of similarities and captures this world this poem described very well as Dante journeys deeper and deeper into the depths of the Inferno. The gameplay is very exciting and fast-paced, including Dante's weaponry, which has 3 different options. First is his scythe. It has a normal attack that has him attack fast, but doesn't deal a lot of damage. And then there's a heavy attack that takes longer to do, but deals more damage. Second is God. To be more specified, his cross, which fires cross-shaped glowing orbs that deal a moderate amount of damage. These 2 attacks can be upgraded by a progression tree that can be unlocked through defeating enemies and gaining unholy and holy experience. What's unholy and holy experience, you may ask? Well, throughout the game, Dante judges different historical figures in hell. For example, Pontius Pilate, the man who contributed to Jesus' death. If you choose the punish option, you gain unholy experience and stab him. But if you absolve them, you will gain holy experience and they will float up in the air. Each experience connects to a different skill tree. This forces players to choose between which abilities they want more in each tree. So, you may try to be a good guy, try to absolve everyone you come across, but there's a twist. You have to play a boring minigame. Forget this. 40 seconds. You're telling me that you're just going to do this every time? No way your dopamine damaged brain would do that. So, instead, you could save some time and just punish the people, gaining unholy experience instantly. At least that's what I did around halfway through the game. Oh, and this system also applies to some enemies, but without the absolving minigame. We bring the food! The third option is magic. There are 4 total magic spells that players can collect throughout the game. They can be retrieved after defeating bosses. I only use 2 of them for most of the game, but still, they're pretty useful for when you're fighting a big mob of hellspawn. There's also platforming and swinging that helps Dante get to where he needs to be. It's a little weird at first, but I mean, you get used to it and it becomes pretty fun. Set in the year 1191, you are Dante, a knight fighting in the Third Crusade with the Christians. So there you are, Dante, fighting Muslim people, committing war crimes, and bam, stabbed in the back. Next thing you know, it's the Grim Reaper, and he's come for Dante's soul, but Dante's like, what? No, the bishop said all souls from our side would be forgiven. But that's not how it works. So you begin your very first boss fight in this game against Death, and shockingly, you defeat him with his own weapon. So as Death begs for mercy, Dante rips him in half. Upon learning that he has, sinned a lot, Dante sews a cross tapestry on his chest representing his sins and heads back home to Florence to his wife, Beatrice. He opens the door and there's his father lying with a cross stuck in his head. So he hits a little prayer, then heads to the back to discover Beatrice is dead, with a whole sword stuck into her. But as he starts to grieve, Beatrice's soul appears and then is taken by the devil. He screams and gives chase. Beatrice! Killing undead as he gets closer. Eventually, he gets to her again in a church or some kind of religious building. She says something about Dante breaking a promise before rising up and disappearing. This is when Dante is given his cross powers. He then has a flashback when the bishop absolves the Christian knights of their sins. The building breaks and before you know it, there is a big hole leading straight into hell. The journey into hell and to rescue Beatrice begins. Waiting at the gates of hell is Virgil. Based on a real-life Roman poet, he acts as a guide for Dante. In the book, he's a lot more involved when protecting Dante, but in the game, Dante is very capable of protecting himself. In Dante's Inferno, there are 9 circles of hell, all representing different sins, except for the first one, that being limbo. It's where like actual good people who just didn't believe in Jesus or Christian views go. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just kind of meh.
It's called the limbo because every single thing in it is mid.
In the game, it's a lot more fiery compared to the books, but the main idea is still the same. "Let me drive the boat," Dante exclaimed as he killed the ferry driver, who was also the ferry itself. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, but these are Asterian beasts. Once you defeat their initial rider, Dante can take control and fight enemies with them. It's pretty fun. After just barely escaping and finishing off the ferry driver, Dante comes face to face with King Minos, judge of the dead. He determines people's sins and sends them on their merry way to whichever circle they belong below. This is one of my favorite boss kills in the game because Dante wraps this guy's tongue around this saw thingy and just does that. After some Spider-Man swinging and killing these stupid bats, Dante has reached the second circle, lust. Those who have committed lust would be cast to being slammed into each other in a giant wind whirl, as they themselves were ruled by sexual desire. Going to hell for having lots of sex doesn't seem totally fair, but I guess dumb the rules in Dante's Inferno. This zone is overseen by a big lady. I mean Cleopatra, like the Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra? Why her exactly? I don't know. Able to make his way through the storm and into the tower, Dante makes his way to the top and nothing weird happens on the way up. Nothing at all. Once reaching the top, Dante learns that Beatrice knows about an affair that he had with a prisoner during war, an agreement for her and her brother's freedom.
Right hand on the Bible, God can strike me down if I'm lying? That motherfucker's cheating! Take my...
But before anything else can be explained, Beatrice and the devil disappear, thus beginning the second boss fight. The big lady has gone to the top of the tower, and she has a guy in her mouth. It's Mark Antony. He's this region's boss, and he's pretty tough, but, not tough enough for the man who killed Death earlier. She grieves the death of her lover before being killed by Dante himself. The tower breaks and he escapes. After swinging past some flaming holes that look suspiciously like buttholes, Dante has reached the third circle, gluttony. For those who ate not because they had to, but because of a greedy appetite. Their punishment is a constant fall of harsh rain, snow, and hail, along with getting chased, and if caught, eaten by its tormentors. The main tormentor is Cerberus, a really big 3-headed dog that can eat people whole. This leads to a back-to-back boss battle for Dante, but, since he's the main character, he takes the heads off one by one, and then is eaten. Nah, I'm just kidding, he's good. He just uses the power of God, and, bam. Dante's journey continues, slicing and dicing enemies till he encounters Lucifer again, who taunts Dante about his sins and ends his remark with a vision of the death of Beatrice and his dad. There are several mentions of Dante's dad throughout the game, and he is a very, very bad person, even in this cutscene, trying to take advantage of his son's wife while she's grieving. But that is interrupted by an intruder who kills the dad and Beatrice. The devil leaves and Dante continues. Wow, the circle of gluttony looks different. Oh, we left? Where are we now? Greed. Got it. Alright. The fourth circle of greed is where those who cared only for themselves. Similar to gluttony, but it's for everything, not just food. The punishment for its residents is to push boulders, boil alive in gold, and have your head chopped off. The circle has a lot more of a factory vibe to it, with giant machines everywhere serving different forms of punishment. This is a long circle compared to the previous ones and is probably my favorite in the game. The puzzles are good, there's a giant gold guy, and you get to fight with the beast again. Oh shoot, it's his dad! Wookie. Yeah, it makes sense that he's here. Every cutscene this guy is in, he's just repulsive and horrible. So him and Dante fight, and there goes the old man. Dante absolves him, and in return gets a cartoonishly large green jewel. Anger. The fifth circle of hell is where those with extreme, uncontrolled anger go. Stuck in a swamp where they give in to their anger and fight each other for eternity. Although throughout the entire level, I did not see anyone fighting. Just kind of suffering instead. Nevertheless, Dante continues and even gets a ride on this circle's boss. Oh my god, how do I say that word? Phlegus. Momentarily escaping, we find out why Beatrice is suffering because of Dante's sins. You see, Lucifer and Beatrice made a deal, wagering her soul that Dante would be faithful to his wife when he was at war. But since he cheated, Beatrice lost her soul. Seeing no reason to trust Dante along with being corrupted by the devil, Beatrice eats the forbidden beans. She eats the forbidden beans and is fully corrupted. Dante, devastated, sees no other option but to continue forward, and so he hops on that guy and breaks into the city of Dis, a giant fortress that's so big it's just hard to comprehend. I mean, look at that. It's ginormous. In the city is the rest of hell, meaning Dante has now entered into the sixth circle. Heresy. Those who held views that contradicted the Christian views held at the time. Their punishment to spend eternity in tombs that were basically always on fire. Kind of like an oven. Or that like one metal bowl thing. The punishments from now on will be a lot more bad because circles 6 through 9 are considered the lower levels of hell and are for punishments considered a lot more serious. The map for the circle does seem a lot more confined and uncomfy, along with containing much more fire, and definitely feels like much more of a harsh environment compared to the previous circles. Gameplay, and bam! Dante has arrived in the 7th circle, Violence. This circle has 3 rings for 3 types of violence. Violence against others, violence against oneself, and violence against God. Dante arrives in the first ring, violence against others. The punishment is to be boiled in a river of blood. The more serious your violence was, the deeper you would be pushed to the bottom. After some pretty quick platform hopping, Dante has arrived to the second ring, violence against oneself. Their punishment was to be turned into trees that constantly have their branches torn off, and they can feel it all, so it's very painful. This is because it is thought in Dante's Inferno that if one denies the gift of their own body by God, then they shall never be connected with it again, so being turned into trees. Virgil even says, "It is unjust that any soul
possess that of which it has robbed itself."
At the entrance, Dante is told to turn back since he isn't ready for this. He goes forth anyways and finds his mother, who he had thought died from fever, but had actually hung herself in order to escape his father. It's pretty sad, but before she's absolved by Dante, she says,
"It is too late for us, son. There is still time for her."
Showing that maybe Beatrice can be saved after all, and that Dante probably won't be leaving hell. Once leaving the woods, Dante arrives to the final ring, violence against God. Their punishment's kinda cool. Not like fun cool, but more like interesting cool. The inhabitants must walk forever on sand that burns, like 3rd degree burns. And if they stop walking to maybe like sit down and rest, they are stuck in that position for 100 years. Stuck burning alive, not being able to move at all. Beatrice's brother, Francisco, went off to war along with Dante and can almost all the time be seen in the flashback cutscenes along with Dante. In many scenes, he is often the voice of reason, but eventually he too committed many deadly sins. Sadly, he died and had become corrupted by hell into this thing. Aided by other troops, they attack Dante, but their efforts prove fruitless. Dante defeats and absolves his friend. The platform Dante stood on falls, descending into the 8th circle. Fraud. Once reaching the circle of fraud, Dante encounters Beatrice, who, for the moment, is evil. She has him go through the 10 zones of fraud, with each zone representing a different type of lie that contains a different punishment. Sadly, instead of being like the book, the game has Dante do 10 challenges he must complete. This is my least favorite part of the game. It messes with the pacing and is just really boring. Upon finishing all of the challenges, Dante meets up with Beatrice, who calls him out for Francesco's death. In a flashback, we are shown Francesco taking the blame for the death of the prisoners that Dante had killed. Dante then takes blame for all of his sins, saying how he should stay in hell, and gives Beatrice her cross. This revelation breaks Beatrice free from the devil's corruption, along with summoning the angel Gabriel, who states that Dante's redemption is near before taking Beatrice to heaven. The 9th and final circle, treachery. Dedicated to those who had betrayed people close to them and that had trusted them. This punishment was being cased in ice for eternity. The main prisoner here would be Lucifer himself, stuck in the deepest, coldest, and worst part of hell, forever to suffer for his betrayal against God. Once he progresses through some enemies, Dante has reached the final boss of the game, the devil. Dante, of course, does his thing, and bam, the devil is defeated. We did it, guys. Or is he? You see, this isn't Lucifer. This is his prison. And once Dante did enough damage to it, Lucifer is freed. It turns out the devil's plan wasn't to actually marry Beatrice, but to instead bait Dante into journeying through hell to free him. Dante is pretty upset about this, so in retaliation, he beats the devil in a pretty fun final boss fight. But before Dante finishes him off, the devil reveals one last twist. That this is all taking place in Dante's head. What? Nah, I'm just kidding. The twist is that Dante has been dead for the whole game. The devil's like, haha, I won. And Dante's just like, what? No. So he just blasts him back into his prison with the souls he had collected throughout the game and traps him back into the ice. One cool detail I noticed when this was happening, the devil tried to bargain with Dante, and Dante immediately shot him down because he knew if he heard the devil out, he might actually take the deal. You see, Dante changed throughout the game by becoming aware of his weaknesses and sins and making sure to not even trust himself if given an opportunity like this. Standing there with his mission complete, Dante's perspective changes to the other side of the ice. Being taken by Beatrice, he awakes in a cave. Walking out, he removes the cross tapestry from his chest, his final lines being,
I did not die, and I did not live.
I'll just quickly go over some points real quick. What happened in the ending? Well, Dante confronted all of his sins, and in doing so was given a start to his redemption on Mount Purgatory. This would have been the second game, but sadly there was nothing ever made. This is just speculation, but they probably would have done a trilogy since the original poems were split into 3 sections. One in hell, one in purgatory, and one in heaven. So at least we can make a pretty good guess for what happens to Dante after the first game concluded. The story was pretty decent, I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was still not bad. Along with the dialogue being solid and keeping me intrigued throughout the entire game. The game did a good job connecting characters together. For example, it turns out the guy that killed Dante in the beginning was also the same guy that killed Beatrice, Dante's dad, and was the prisoner's husband, not her brother. It also had good pacing, the music made sense, the cutscenes were really well made, and the gameplay was fun. And my favorite part, the backgrounds. When journeying through this game, the backgrounds and settings of each circle were so cool to see. Like for example, every climbing wall has people in it, all shoved together and begging for mercy as you climb by. Or anytime you're climbing along a zip line and look downwards, you're just like, holy moly, it is massive in here. Being able to actually see the stuff told in Dante's poem was really cool and really showed what this hellish world would look like. Now on a personal note, it was funny how some of the punishments were kind of lame compared to the others, along with certain sins that were somehow worse than other ones. So I think it's best to remember that this game was based off of a poem by one guy in the 14th century who had very strong opinions about what was right and wrong. And it's technically a fan fiction since Christianity does not accept this writing as canon. So I find it best just to enjoy the world built from this poem and the game developers and don't overthink it. I don't got much else to say besides bye.